Get going. Put on those shoes. Get trundling along. I'm talking to you, Mark Mandroff. Mark is our running, but he's out there trundling around. He can't go to the gym, so he's trundling on the streets of somewhere inside the Beltway. And to all of you trundlers, I do mine after 9 a.m., but I see you out there. I know you're out there. Pick up the pace. I'm going to play a little Hamilton music for you today to celebrate the news that it's actually very shocking in a business sense that Disney is going to open Hamilton online on July 3rd. So you just right now, if you're married to or have one of those people in your family, you're going to see Hamilton 4 times on July 3rd and 4th, maybe 5. And you're going to sign up for Disney Plus. Just telling you. Just mark that off. So, and Captain Mark is a big Hamilton fan. The room where it that's all he ever sings when he runs along. So we'll pick up the pace a little bit with our bumps today for him. Big show today. Bob Costa's coming by. Admiral Stavridis, of course. Utah Senator Mike Lee will be here. Mike Waltz, Congressman from Florida, joining us. Eliana Johnson. Richard Haass, who you normally see on Morning Joe, is coming by here. If you watch Morning Joe, if you're that person, you know Richard Haass is on. Alistair Adele, who's the Maricopa County attorney and bringing sanity to Arizona, and is going to be here to bounce off the early release guest I had last week. I had a guest arguing for early release because of the virus from prison, and Alistair Adele, who is the Maricopa County attorney, is not so sold on that. So we got a lot of show. However, let's start with some great news. Mike Garcia, who you heard yesterday and the day before on this show, the fighter pilot turned defense industry executive, Annapolis grad, Super Hornet pilot, he has assumed a commanding lead over the Democrat in the 25th Congressional District in California as of midnight, which was 3 a.m. Eastern time for the benefit of the Steelers fans, with more than 142,000 votes counted. Almost totally by mail. Garcia held 56% of the vote. Smith had 44% and trailed by more than 17,000 votes. That's outside the Campbell margin. The Campbell margin, John Campbell, longtime guest on this show, off and on with Generalissimo on the after show, which you can get if you subscribe to the Universe, who never lost a race that he ran for, state assembly, state senate, Congress, and then he retired after, I guess, a dozen years in Congress. He just hated the flying. He said you had to go to bed with a double-digit lead, percentage terms, in California to wake up a winner because of the way that Democrats cheat. And so he's outside the Campbell margin, so I think Mike Garcia has won. Now, he has to run again in November, so he got to do it all again. But that's great. That's Buck McKeon's seat. Mike Garcia, fighter pilot. He's going to be on this show a lot. Looking forward to that. Other news this morning. Mike Garcia, big win. You won't hear much about that. You know, whenever there's a special, it goes for the Democrats. The hard left MSNBC types and the hard left CNN types, they all spend all day talking about it. You're not going to hear about that. Rick Grinnell, my buddy Grinnell, took a walk over to the Department of Justice yesterday and gave them a list from the Office of National Intelligence of all those Obama people who unmasked innocent people at the end of the administration. Now, unmasking is what happens when, for example, I know a few ambassadors from foreign countries. I call them up. And I know that my conversation is almost certainly being recorded. I don't know that it's ever going to be listened to because I'm not that interesting and they're not that interesting. But I know it's being recorded because I worked in that business for a while in the 80s. I know how we do things is that we monitor the conversations, especially of the Russians and of the Chinese, and they do the same to us. This is all very well known. There are a half dozen countries in the world that listen to everything. And if an American is being taped talking to a Russian, Boris and Natasha are on the phone with Joe Bag of Donuts. Joe Bag of Donuts' name is not revealed in the transcripts of what the Boris and Natasha say because we protect Americans. Well, not at the end of Team Obama's term. They spitballed and machine gunned the names around town of everyone who had talked to anyone in an attempt to create the cloud that became the Russia hoax. And Obamagate, which is shorthand for interference, intentional interference with the seamless transition of power, which is a great tradition of the Republic. Obamagate is in part about that unmasking. And Grinnell gave DOJ a list. Now, it hasn't leaked yet. I got friends at Justice. I hope they give it to me, but it hasn't leaked to me yet. Now, I got to tell you about a story, two stories. One good news, one bad news. Here's the good news. Will summer camps open? This is a Wall Street Journal story. Turns out some are. The reason this matters to me is because, of course, my Angel Tree kids. I am a huge supporter of the Angel Tree effort to send children of prisoners to camp. And the more of the Angel Tree camps that open, we're not going to leave any kid behind. We're going to touch all the kids that we always get to. Normally, we send them for a week or 2 weeks out in the wild to get them out of the circumstances that they find themselves in, mom or dad in jail. And we usually get them out to a camp. If we can't do that this year, we're going to send them a care package. Here's a quote from an Angel Tree field director. I pray before I get on a phone with a child's guardian. It's such a blessing to be able to share hope and let kids know they aren't forgotten and that they are loved. The stories are traumatic. The things these families and children have to go through, all the problems these families face being magnified. Some are without work or down to 10 hours a week. It makes them so very grateful we can offer hope and support. Now, in all 50 states, we have this organization, Angel Tree, run by Prison Fellowship. Your one-time gift of $200 will either send a kid to camp, or if the camp doesn't open, we will send that child $150 in grocery gift cards, which is used for good food, awesome new Bible, age-appropriate study materials, sports equipment. A note of encouragement is the sports equipment they really want, right? They're going to give mom or dad the one, their guardian. They're going to say, here, go buy the turkey, go buy the hamburger, the good stuff. You don't get to go buy, candy with it. But I get the basketball, I get the soccer ball, I get the tennis racket, which is great because there are public courts all over the place. But we need your help to do that. You go to HughHewitt.com, click on the Angel Tree banner, or phone in your gift toll free, 888-206-2764, 888-206-2764. Let me also tell you, though, there's a story which I'm going to talk to you about. Fearing a second wave, Cal State will keep classes online in the fall. Cal State University has 480,000 undergraduates. 480,000 undergraduates. Oh, don't worry about it. We're going to do it online. Let me tell you this. If it's not open, I'm not going. And I'm speaking to parents now and to college kids or kids who are in college. Here's what you do. College is about learning. It's about learning. It's about improving your mind and doing so away from the chatter and the clatter of your ordinary routine. Go live somewhere else. Go find a place where it's safe to live. An aunt, an uncle, a cousin, a friend, out of the city in which you live, and go to the library. And listen to this show and listen to the Hillsdale Dialogues and watch the Hillsdale courses. Do not pay good money to go to Cal State or any university that's all online. Don't do that. They will be up and running again in a year. And I know this creates a financial disaster. Guess what? You're going to have to fire some faculty. You're going to have to go in reverse order, last hired, first fired. And you're going to have to get rid of the departments that shouldn't be there anyway. You're going to have to cut a lot of staff because universities are in financial crisis because they're tuition dependent. But you do not pay full freight for an online experience. That's like joining a golf club and getting one of those screens that you hit balls into. That was big in the 60s for a while. In the 70s, you go and hit balls into a screen. It's, oh, you're playing the Masters. No, you're not. You're not playing Augusta. You're hitting balls into a screen. And it was okay for a month at the end of a semester, but that's not college. College is about being on your own and learning on your own. And you can do that at a library in a city somewhere not your own, in a family not your own, in an attic upstairs. Be a student. Don't be a consumer of online courses. That's for the older people. I'll be July 3rd, America. I'm not going to tell you what my role is in this film. You're going to have to pick me out. Welcome back. 22 minutes after the hour, I'm Hugh Hewitt. I'm looking at my body metrics report from last night. I had a lousy night's sleep. If you're watching on the universe, I've got my circle ring on, and they're like in all the hospitals in New York now. Everyone wears it to check their oxygen level. But it's really good to see what you did for sleep, right? So I had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 REM cycles last night, and a decent amount of deep sleep, but 7.5 interruptions, and that is Fauda's fault. What is Fauda? Fauda is the Israeli series on Shin Bet, and I'm in season 3, episode 11. So it's just nerve-wracking as can be. Don't watch. I should just watch Seinfeld. I have started to watch Seinfeld from the beginning. I'm in season 1, episode 5, and it's great. And that's what I should watch before I go to bed. Business story of the day brought to you by Birch Gold. And you know, gold is at 1702 this morning, 1706. Gone up significantly from when the crisis began. And I am a believer that, this crisis will end. We will develop the therapeutics. We will develop the vaccine. We will get out of this. And then all that money that we've hosed down the world with, it's going to start to accelerate, and we're going to have inflation, which is why I'm fully invested. I was worried about the underpinnings. I got out, then I got back in because I said, you know what? The Fed did the right thing. I think Larry Kudlow said $8 trillion yesterday in direct and indirect aid. And that's one country. All the countries in the West are doing that. China's a mess. But in any event, gold is a great place to be. You need to diversify into gold, and you need to send my name, Hugh, to 474747, and Birch Gold will send you all the info. Hugh. That's all. Can you spell H-U-G-H, Steelers fan? 474747. Text away. Or go to hughgold.com and you'll find out about Birch Gold. Great, great, great group of people. Here is the Financial Times this morning. Trump raises threat of new front in economic conflict with China. Beijing officials have been worried since late last year that Donald Trump would follow up his 2-year China trade fight with a financial war. The first shot in that second conflict was fired on Tuesday by the U.S. president. In letters to the head of the government's main pension fund, which Mr. Trump does not directly control, administration officials urged the Federal Retirement Thrift Investment Board not to invest in index funds that buy Chinese shares. The president's instruction lacked the drama of the trade war's repeated declarations of punitive tariffs and counter-tariffs that rocked the global financial markets for most of 2018 and 19. But the latest salvo still sent a clear signal to international investors and Chinese officials who've been bracing themselves for such a move. He's absolutely right to do so. They have poisoned the world. And we are in Cold War 2.0. Richard Haass of the Council on Foreign Relations will be along later to argue that no, we're not, and we shouldn't be. And I'm going to argue with him and say, yeah, Richard, we are. And I believe in realism. We are. And that Cold War is going to go on a long time until the Chinese Communist Party changes up. I mean, there's another story today that on the ground in Wuhan, signs of China stalling probe of coronavirus origins. Of course they are. They're communists. They've poisoned the world, and they're communists. And we all just fell asleep at the wheel, and I'm not asleep at the wheel. We can be friends with the Chinese people. We can look to what is possible when you see Taiwan and Hong Kong, but let's not be rose-colored glasses wearing, shall we? Let me also tell you about givingmasks.com, because I get my masks from givingmasks.com/Hugh. And the reason is Children's Hospital of Orange County gets a box for every box I order. They go to the hosts around the country and they say, people need masks, have them order from givingmasks.com/Hugh. And we'll send a box of masks to your favorite hospital. My favorite hospital, I got a lot of them, but I picked CHOC, Children's Hospital of Orange County, because I know what CHOC does. And CHOC is, as the number of, it's still very, very small, the number of the cases of children impacted by the COVID inflammatory syndrome, they're going to need lots of masks, and you're going to need masks. So go to givingmasks.com and get them from there. I'll be right back, America. Admiral Stav joins me next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by Birch Gold Group.
I'm going to click it. And you should hear me now on Skype. How's that? So you got it? No, I'm just going to go with voice, if that's okay. I think whichever sounds better to you. Right now, I've got both of them on. You okay? You want me to? Yeah, sure. Ending the Skype call.
33 minutes after the hour, America. Hamilton coming to the Disney Channel on July 3rd, probably the biggest news of the day. And I have been warning all people out there who are married to Hamilton addicts like I am that they might as well prepare to watch it 3, 4, 5 times on July 3rd and 4th. Admiral James Stavridis, retired United States Navy, former Allied Supreme Commander of NATO, former head of Southern Command. I suspect he's a Hamilton fan, though not an addict. Am I right about that, Admiral?
I think you've got it exactly right. It's an important piece of history, and I love the way the contemporary production brings it together with music and cultural mores. It's a terrific piece of work.
Right now, Admiral, I'm going to turn to China in a second, but first I want to tap your chops as an educator. California State University system is going to, quote, reopen virtually. They're not going to let students back on campus. My advice to those students is don't go. I mean, you can get virtual college campus experience from Hillsdale for free, and you can go live somewhere else and use the local library. And I thought of you and the Admiral's bookshelf, and the fact is, if you want to educate yourself, you don't need to go to a college, period, but you certainly don't need to be trapped on an online. What is your advice to parents who are looking at stroking big checks for an online experience?
Let me first give some advice to higher education broadly. And as you allude to, I spent 5 years as dean of the Fletcher School of Law and Diplomacy at Tufts University, one of the top graduate schools of international relations. I think it's too soon to make that call on the fall. I think there could be a blended approach, which brings some of the students in a cohort. They get educated on campus with appropriate social distancing. You cycle them, you bring in another cohort. You could certainly do a blend of online and in-person. But to your point, and to answer the question, a fundamental part of what you pay for as a parent or as a student yourself is that interaction with the other students. That's such a fundamental part of higher education, both baccalaureate, master's, even PhD, that integration is crucial. You're not getting full value for the money. If Cal State wants to take that approach, I think they're going to have to significantly discount tuition for that semester at a minimum.
I agree with that. Now, network effects of going with people are what matter. I noted at the beginning of the show that United States Naval Academy graduate Mike Garcia appears to have won his congressional race in California's 25th. I think he's class of 1989, and Super Hornet pilot. That'll be a great addition to the Congress. But the network effects of attending Annapolis never go away, right? But that's because you've bunked with someone in close quarters and you've eaten in the largest dining room in America for 4 years.
That's exactly right. 4,000 midshipmen sit down all at once to one meal together in Bancroft Hall. And it is a fundamental part of what makes Annapolis, West Point, our Air Force Academy at Colorado Springs, Merchant Marine Academy in Kings Point, New York. What makes them all work is that bonded personal experience. And if we're going to maintain that, and I would argue that is a significant part of our ability to defend the nation, those connections. Look at the World War II admirals that were so deeply connected by their time together at Annapolis. We can't let that drift away in the face of this virus. And I'm sure the service academies are going to bring those students in. They'll give them a quarantine period. Then they will isolate, put them in a bubble, and educate them. That's hard to do, but you've got to do it for national defense, and I think universities are going to have to figure out a way to do something similar.
Now, you just mentioned the admirals, and Sailing True North is your most recent book. Your ears might have been burning yesterday because I was talking to Harry Rhodes, our mutual friend at the Washington Speaker Bureau. And Paul Begall and I used to do ham and eggs out on the road. We do political stuff. That doesn't work online, right? A lot of that is actually the physical part of being together and interacting. And, you know, I'm just a straight man. I'm Dick Smothers to Tommy Smothers when I'm out with Begala. But you and the Admiral's presentation, I just think you're made for virtual meetings. Have you done many of those yet?
I have. I'm doing 2 or 3 a week. Mostly pro bono right now, but I'm hoping over time this can be part of the good work we do together for the Washington Speakers Bureau. It is a reality of the moment. I don't think it'll ever substitute for the power of the in-person presentation, but it certainly can be very effective. And yes, I'm doing a fair amount of that right now and enjoying it.
I just tell a little commercial for the Admiral. Because it is multimedia, it's a lot better than listening to Begala and Hewitt talk at you over the virtual screen. It just is, it's a very well done thing. Now let's get to China, Admiral. I'm going to talk with our mutual friend Richard Haass a little bit later. I'm going to argue with him because he doesn't want to say we're in Cold War 2.0. And I'm sorry, I'm from the Nixon school. I spent 78, 79, and 80 with Richard Nixon right out of college writing The Real War with him. And you call the world as it is so that you can manage it, that it might become what you hope. And right now we are in a full-throated confrontation. I'm looking at two headlines. Trump raises threat of new front in economic conflict with China from the Financial Times, from the Wall Street Journal on the ground in Wuhan, signs of China stalling probe of coronavirus origins. A lot of people, including the vice president, don't want to use Cold War 2.0 on this show, Admiral, but I do. What do you think of it?
I think we are close to that, but not quite there. So you and I both have a lot of regard for Dr. Henry Kissinger. I want to say about 6 months ago, he said we are in the foothills of a Cold War, which is to say we're ascending a mountain toward a peak we don't want to get to, but we're not quite there yet. So I think this is one where people can have a debate about where we are. What we all agree on, you, me, Richard Haass, Dr. Kissinger, I'm sure, is that tensions are rising significantly. And that when you lay this coronavirus on top of what was already an increasingly fraught relationship because of trade and tariff imbalance, because of the 5G network confrontation, because of cyber activity, very aggressive by China, because of artificial islands in the South China Sea, that was fraught to begin with 8 months ago. Park coronavirus on top of it, we are definitely moving out of those foothills and toward a full-blown Cold War. I think we would all agree on that.
Yeah. What is interesting to me, Admiral, is that I know nothing about sailing a ship. I don't know anything about being a task force commander or commanding the Allies in Afghanistan like you. Richard Haass knows a lot about a lot of places in the world. I'm just a lawyer. I know torts. I know duty, breach, causation, damages. China is responsible here. It's not our fault that we don't have PPE in a large accumulation somewhere. It's not our. You never blame the victim for when the perpetrator causes an accident and an injury. But I do see a lot of the foreign policy establishment that is not eager for a confrontation with China for a variety of reasons, trying to fluff off on the world their unpreparedness. This is simply not acceptable in my view. It's not the American legal system.
I agree that China is responsible, and I believe that China is culpable, two different things, and I think that there has to be accountability. So my prescription would be hold China accountable, and that means an international, scientifically based investigation, certainly to include Chinese representation, but we need to understand how this got out of China, why it appears as though China was very slow to notify and may have held the World Health Organization back. There's a great deal of accountability, responsibility, and culpability there, all three of which need to be examined in depth. That's going to be a bit of a longer-term process. It lands on the election year here. That's unfortunate, but it's simply a reality. We're going to have to push through that, set up a serious commission. You should ask Richard Haass about that. And by the way, to China and U.S. and confrontation, Hugh, I commend to you, if you haven't read it yet, David Ignatius's column today about the potential for U.S.-China confrontation in the South China Sea. What would that look like from a military perspective? It's quite good and quite concerning.
If that's the case, you better get the TR back out pretty soon. Let me close this by asking you, Admiral, I think Taiwan is a huge issue here. And I think that we make our displeasure known because, again, I'm a realist. This is not going to go. They're not going to let us in. They're not going to admit it's too much of a problem for Xi. I just jump ahead to, maybe I'm wrong. I doubt it. I think there's a 10% chance he decides to go Khrushchev's secret speech and be honest with the world, but it's very low. What do we do vis-a-vis Taiwan? Because that is, to me, the lever that we use here.
I agree 100% with supporting Taiwan. I mean, here's a relatively small nation, 23 million. I've been there several times. I've met with the current president, Madam Tsai, and it is a dynamic, incredible economy for starters. I mean, it's about the 25th largest economy in the world, and it is, as you say, an opportunity to keep China from consolidating the complete South China Sea, because geographically it sits as the gateway at the northern edge of the South China Sea. So we ought to support Taiwan. In my view, that means military-to-military activity, military sales. We can do that. It's going to be extremely annoying to China, but I don't think China's in a position to make a big move against Taiwan. Let's hope they're not tempted into doing something that they will regret deeply later.
A quick question. We've sold F-35s to Japan. It is the newest fighter. It is stealth. Should we sell them to Taiwan?
I don't think Taiwan needs the F-35 yet, but I think that the fourth and 4.5 generation fighters, the very high end of F-16, F-18, et cetera, I think would be eligible for them. And I think more in their price range. And coupled with working with the U.S. military-to-military context, I think that would be the appropriate level of sale.
Admiral, always a pleasure. Follow him at Stavridis. If you want to book him for your meeting, go to Washington Speakers. I think it's WSB Experience on Twitter, but Washington Speakers Bureau, and you will not be disappointed. Thank you, Admiral. Time for me to tell you about... Oh, my gosh, I'm almost out of this bag. I got the very last one in the bag. That's it. Got to get a new bag of ReliefFactor.com. 8 miles yesterday, folks, 8 miles. I was walking. I wasn't running. Not only is that not lukewarm, it's hot. That's hard to eat. Relief Factor is best taken with lukewarm coffee. ReliefFactor.com, ReliefFactor.com. I take it every day, and I actually must tell you, although this is unusual for the fetching Mrs. Hewitt and I, were both in great shape. She got a high ankle sprain, so she can't do the 8, 10, 12 miles that I'm doing. But I'm listening to a terrific book by Tom Holland called Dynasty about the Julio Claudian dynasty. I'm up to Tiberius now. He's a guy who went bad. They all kind of went bad. The Romans were nuts. But ReliefFactor.com plus a great book on tape, and you can go a long way. You can go a very long way and feel good about it. So please join the tens of thousands of us who take Icarian, Curcumin, Resveratrol, and Omega every single morning. Also want to encourage you to subscribe to Honor Bound Coffee. Get your coffee delivered to your house every couple of weeks, every month, however often you need it. Great coffee. And then every dollar of profits, as they scale up, it gets more and more. If we can get 100,000 people drinking Honor Bound coffee, we can really support Semperfi America's Fund. We'll be doing our annual Memorial Day show for the Semperfi America's Fund. They take care of the wounded warriors from all the branches. And HonorBoundCoffee.com supports them, so you should get your coffee from HonorBoundCoffee.com. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show. My favorite song in Hamilton, America. Welcome back. I'm Hugh Hewitt. Hamilton debuting on the Disney Channel July 3rd. Just be prepared to watch it pretty much nonstop if you are married to or have a Hamilton addict in the family, as I am and do. Joe Biden on Good Morning America. Again, only safe spaces for Joe Biden. He went on GMA yesterday with George Stephanopoulos. Now, remember, Sally Yates, under oath, said that on January 5th, she was in the Oval Office talking about Mike Flynn with President Obama and James Comey and John Brennan. And that's right, Joe Biden, he was there. Cut number 5.
I do want to ask you about Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump, and the move by the Justice Department last week to dismiss the case against him for lying to the FBI. The president said yesterday that that move is justified because President Obama targeted Flynn. He called it, quote, the biggest political crime in U.S. history. Your former Senate colleague, Charles Grassley, has added that Flynn was entrapped and asked on the Senate floor, what did Obama and Biden know? When did they know it? So what did you know about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, and was there anything improper done?
I know nothing about those moves to investigate Michael Flynn, number one. Number two, this is all about diversion. This is a game this guy plays all the time.
Stop. I know nothing. Sergeant Schultz has showed up. I know nothing. But even George Stephanopoulos has to say to him, wait a minute. You were in the room where it happened, cut number 6.
I do want to press that. You say you didn't know anything about it, but you were reported to be at a January 5th, 2017 meeting where you and the president were briefed on the FBI's plan to question Michael Flynn over those conversations he had with the Russian ambassador Kislyak.
Now, I thought you asked me whether or not I had anything to do with him being prosecuted.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Stop, Joe. Honest to God, Joe gets out of his safe space. He's expecting softballs. Let's go back and hear the first question Joe Biden has asked, cut number 5, about the Flynn investigation.
I do want to ask you about Michael Flynn, the former national security advisor to President Trump, and the move by the Justice Department last week to dismiss the case against him for lying to the FBI. The president said yesterday that that move is justified because President Obama targeted Flynn. He called it, quote, the biggest political crime in U.S. history. Your former Senate colleague, Charles Grassley, has added that Flynn was entrapped and asked on the Senate floor, what did Obama and Biden know? When did they know it? So what did you know about those moves to investigate?
So what did you know about those moves? That was the question. Then he says, oh, I don't know anything. I know nothing. And then let's play cut 6.
I do want to press that. You say you didn't know anything about it, but you were reported to be at a January 5th, 2017 meeting where you and the president were briefed on the FBI's plan to question Michael Flynn over those conversations he had with the Russian ambassador Kislyak.
Now, I thought you asked me whether or not I had anything to do with him being prosecuted.
So you can either conclude that Joe can't follow a simple sentence or that he's lying. It's your choice. It's your choice. By the way, George even brings up the charges against Joe Biden, which I have not discussed on this show because they don't make the Hewitt rule one standard. But George brought it up, and here's what Joe Biden said, cut number 7.
Finally, Mr. Vice President,
no damage so far that I can see.
On these allegations from Tara Reade, I know you've denied them, but you've also said that women should be believed. So what do you say to Americans who believe Tara Reade and won't vote for you because of it?
Well, that's their right. Look, I think women should be believed. They should have an opportunity to have their case and state it just forthrightly what their case is. Then it's the responsibility of responsible journalists like you and everyone else to go out and investigate those. At the end of the day, the truth is the truth. That's what should prevail. And the truth is, this never happened. This never happened. I assure you. That's the truth.
Mr. Vice President, thank you for your time this morning.
So, of course, my follow-up would have been, so how is that different from Brett Kavanaugh saying this never happened and nobody believing him? On the Democratic side of the dais, what is that all about? Is Christine Blasey Ford more or less credible? Now, neither of them have reached the limit, the standard that I have. Disastrous day for Joe Biden with George Stephanopoulos. I mean, there are no safe spaces when you can't keep the alphabet straight. I don't know anything about that. Oh, I thought you meant that I start a nuclear war. I mean, it's incredible. I don't know anything about that. Oh, I thought you were talking about, bringing the charges, not being in a meeting in which we're talking about the wiretaps. Joe Biden, really, Joe Biden. I'm just amazing. Look, play Kayleigh McEnany, cut number 11 quickly.
Yeah, look, it is not a distraction to bring this up. Anytime the FBI writes down on a piece of paper asking whether their motive in interviewing someone, if their end goal is to, quote, get someone to lie, in this case, getting Michael Flynn to lie, that should trouble each and every American. And they go on to say, so that we can get him fired. This is incredible what the FBI did. And again,
it is incredible what the FBI did. It is incredible, and I'll talk more about it in hour number 2 of this morning's Hugh Hewitt Show. Morning glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Wednesday, May 13th, in the year of the plague, 2020. Worldwide, almost 300,000 people have died, certainly more than 300,000. We know that the Communist Chinese Party is lying to us, but the worldwide number is at least 4.25 million people with the infection. 83,000 Americans have died, including 1,400 yesterday. 1.4 million infected in the nation of 330 million, and no end in sight. But yesterday, Speaker Nancy Pelosi unveiled her wish list for phase 4, and it's a stunner. There's cash for cannabis in there. I just think it's going to be an amazing bill to follow. Joined now by Robert Costa, who, of course, hosts Washington Week in Review every Friday night, the one show which remains an island of sanity in television when they talk about what's going on in D.C. You got to watch or record Washington Week in Review each week. He's also with, of course, the Washington Post and my colleague at NBC. Good morning, Bob. How are you?
Good morning.
I just have a technical question. When you discuss cash for cannabis on Friday night, if it comes up, how are you going to refer to marijuana? Are you going to use any of the old school terms, or are you going to use the new school terms?
This is a messaging bill. It's an effort by Speaker Pelosi to set the terms for the Democrats as they head into phase 4 negotiations. This is the way everyone can get their ideas on paper, for House Democrats to be able to argue they push for X or Y. But at the end of the day, this is going to come down to a deal that's about tax incentives that the White House wants, state aid that the Democrats want, and finding some common ground.
You remember, well, you won't remember it, but you may have read about the British Labour Party's manifesto back in the days. I believe it was running against John Major. It was called The Longest Suicide Note in History. And I think what Nancy Pelosi put out yesterday is the worst political move I've seen her ever make, because it is a laundry list of crazy stuff. I mean, cash for cannabis? Robert Costa, what were they thinking?
Well, they're thinking, based on my conversations with House Democrats, that Secretary Mnuchin, who has a whole lifetime of being someone who supports Democratic policies, has often been the negotiator at the end of these talks. So they're putting a lot on the table with the hope that maybe some of these items can slip into the final package, because they've been able to get some things in the previous 3 packages that they wouldn't have expected or even assumed if they were working with a Paul Ryan or a Mitch McConnell. But when you work with Secretary Mnuchin, some things seem to come up and be able to be included.
Well, I'll come back to that in a second, but I'm going to try and land the plane for the third time. Because, look, I'm going to talk about cash for cannabis every day. Because to me, there's a story in the Hill about that.
But there's no realistic chance that ever becomes law.
I just know that she put it in her priority list. And so Mike Garcia, new congressman, I think. Do you agree with me? He's probably one out there in the 25th in California, Robert?
Republicans seem very up about his chances, no doubt about it.
Yeah, so when Congressman Garcia comes back and he has to run again the same race, they got to run that race again in November, I think he's going to talk about cash for cannabis. When the country is reeling and 82,000 Americans are dead, and we go to the Democrats and ask, what do you want? And they want dollars for dope. I just don't think it was good messaging. I actually think they lost a huge round yesterday, Bob Costa. And I don't know that the media is quite aware yet of how badly they bungled this, as opposed to Mitch McConnell's messaging, which is, in my view, I'll see what you think. He's messaged one must have, the same one that Larry Kudlow said on this show yesterday. What do you think his one must have is?
Well, he's articulated it multiple times: liability protection for businesses.
Yep. And that's what Larry Kudlow said yesterday, and that's what Mitch McConnell says every day, and that's what I say every day. If there is no tort relief, there is no bill. So he says, I must have this one thing, and the Democrats put out, we must have these 1,000 things. I just think it's a terrible strategy, and whether or not Secretary Mnuchin goes in there and wants to wheel and deal politically. You know, Steve Mnuchin doesn't do politics, he does Treasury. Politically, they've just handed us a sword, us being Republican analysts and commentators. You're not. You're a middle guy. You're in the middle. I have no idea how you vote. But I'll tell you what I'm going to be talking about. It's going to be cash for cannabis from now until November.
But the issue with the cash for cannabis as a political bomb, and the way you're framing it, it may well be in certain parts of the country. But in many parts of the country, like Colorado California, where the views on marijuana are different, it's going to be just cast as a small business program to help banks and financial institutions work with cannabis small businesses. So it's going to be about how the Republicans, if they're going to want to have the political outcome and the political messaging you're talking about, they're going to have to hammer cash for cannabis. But at this point, you don't see this vitriol toward cannabis among many Americans.
I don't even feel that. It's got nothing to do with the issue of dope and being legal and marijuana being available in dispensaries. None of that. It's got to do with the fact we're in the middle of a pandemic, and what does Nancy Pelosi ask for? A special interest bailout of cannabis, because that's what their party is.
The point. That's an important point, because the Republicans I'm talking to say if they do any cash for state, it's going to have to be specified for COVID-related projects only.
Yep.
And so how that's defined, this seems pretty broad with the Democratic proposal.
I again, Kudlow laid it out yesterday. They are not opposed to making up the deficits that are responsible for virus protection, but they're not going to bail out pension plans. And I happen to see I follow the numbers on the Treasury window that is open for unemployment. Illinois has taken $12 billion, California's taken $900 million, Connecticut $1.1 billion. I think that's legit money to make up. Those are unemployment checks that we put people out of work. The feds ought to pay up. But that liability protection is going to be there. Let me switch over to Judge Sullivan, Bob Costa. I think Obamagate is easily defined as the intentional interference with the peaceful transition of power. And if, in fact, that January 5th meeting is what it looks like, this is going to be a huge story. You have been here for a long time. Where does, quote, Obamagate, close quote, I'm putting it in air quotes for your benefit, where does it rank in scandals in your view?
We're going to have to see what Judge Sullivan does here. I mean, you saw he just did a little brief order trying to schedule some arguments about how this is all going to be handled and whether he's going to throw out the case or throw out the Justice Department's recommendation. Look, I've covered this Obama administration Trump campaign story for a long time, and you're seeing a total political and cultural war in this country because you see many Democrats keep saying the Obama administration was trying to make sure they had some kind of counter to Russian influence in the election, and the FBI was investigating it. And Republicans are appalled. In their view, they say this was interference in the Trump campaign by not informing him about the full extent of the federal investigation. I've never seen a more explosive issue in my 3.5 years covering this Trump administration than this issue.
I agree. And I have never seen a more explosive document. And I say this with considered study than the Exhibit 4 attached to the Department of Justice motion to dismiss the charges, which is the Sally Yates interview then on January 5, the acting attorney general, in which she explains that no one briefed her about the wiretap on Kislyak that caught Flynn, and that the FBI subsequently, she testifies to the special counsel, they went to the White House without her approval. The FBI works for the DOJ. Have you had a chance to read that yet, Robert?
I have, and there's going to be a debate, though, Hugh. If Judge Sullivan opens up this to a wider discussion publicly, it's going to lead to a big issue for Flynn and the president's allies to confront, because Sullivan's the kind of judge, he'll press them. Are they helping the president's allies? Are these legal arguments going to hold up? I mean, Sullivan's no pushover. So this thing is...
Oh, Sullivan's a great judge.
On the show last Friday, it's far from over.
Yeah, Sullivan's a great judge. Sullivan ripped the Department of Justice when they framed Ted Stevens. He ripped them. But I've got two different opinions. One from Dave Yost, the Attorney General of Ohio, saying this is extraordinary what Sullivan has done. There is no private right of prosecution. Another from a longtime AUSA who's saying he's just opening a window. Everyone wants to comment. They're going to open the window, take in all the briefs, and then put him in a corner, and he's going to dismiss. I think he's going to rip. Whatever he does is going to be interesting. And if he doesn't dismiss, they're going right up to the D.C. Circuit where I used to clerk, Robert. This is far from over if he doesn't dismiss.
Right, because so much of what Barr did, the Attorney General, is Jensen, right, the Attorney General, the U.S. Attorney from St. Louis. He just reexamined all this, and he did found, in his view, total misjudgments, mistakes by the FBI, and the AG looked at that and said, hey, we're going to make a different decision. But That's the Jensen conclusion that fuels the DOJ's action. But at the end of the day, Sullivan's going to have a lot to say about whether this door is closed.
At the end of the day, it's Exhibit 4. It's Sally Yates telling the FBI and the special counsel, I had no idea what they were doing, and Comey ran around me. I'll be right back. Robert Costa, always a pleasure. Follow him on Twitter at Costa Reports. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show brought to you by Sierra Pacific Mortgage. For more info, call 888-888-1172.
Welcome back, America. Wait for it. Hamilton, July 3rd on the Disney Channel. Boy, are they going to get subscribers through the roof. Look, tonight, though, you don't have to wait for Hamilton. There is a Facebook Live event tonight, No Safe Spaces. It's called Not Allowed to Laugh, Free Speech and the Death of Comedy. It's a Facebook Live event. It's hosted by Eric McTaxis, our friend. Adam Carolla, Dennis Prager will be there. Go to the No Safe Spaces Facebook page at 7 p.m. in the East, 4 p.m. in the West. Eric McTaxis hosts an hour-long conversation about free speech, comedy, happiness with Dennis Prager and Adam Carolla. You can submit questions using the hashtag #NoSafeSpaces. And if you want to watch the film before they have the Facebook Live discussion tonight at 7 in the East, use the code SAVE25 for 25% off the documentary, NoSafeSpaces.com. Also want to remind you, givingmasks.com/Hugh. If you're going to buy masks, and you got to buy masks, get them from givingmasks.com/Hugh, because for every mask you buy, one will be given to CHOC, Children's Hospital of Orange County. And you can write CHOC a check as well, because I love CHOC. CHOC does great work, and increasingly, if the COVID does hit kids, there's very few cases of that. But the alert is up, and people are worried. And I'm grateful for John Roberts for raising it in the Rose Garden a couple of days ago. There are 85 cases as of 2 days ago, 3 of which have been fatal for those poor kids, those poor families. And it's an inflammatory disease, much like Kawasaki syndrome. And places like CHOC will be the front line for treatment. It's very treatable, according to Dr. Fauci and others. But you've got to know it, and you've got to get them to a CHOC in your neighborhood. But the Children's Hospital of Orange County, I think, is the best in the country. I know I get some static from Brett Baer, who loves the one National Children's Hospital in D.C., but I think CHOC in Orange County. So when you get your masks from givingmask.com/Hugh, they get one too. Let me tell you now about the business story of the hour, brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. Boy, this is a big story. This is going to upset a lot of people. You're not going to be upset by the mortgage rates you get from andrewandtodd.com, though. You're going to be ecstatic. You're going to save money, and a lot of people are saving money like they've never saved money before, because they've got to buckle down and get ready for a year of the 7 lean years, the 7 fat years. We've had the 7 fat years. I hope we have 7 lean months. And I do believe in the V-shaped recovery, but people are saving. If you want to save on your mortgage, andrewandtodd.com. They are with Sierra Pacific Mortgage. 888-888-1172. When you go to Sierra Pacific Mortgage, you get the best rates from Andrew and Todd, Andrew Del Rey, Todd Abakian. I have known them personally, Andrew, for 25 years. I trust them with all of my financial dealings on houses. They have always helped members of my family, people who have listened to this show for years. They always talk to Andrew and Todd endlessly about how much you love me, and I love Andrew, and that's all great, and I love Todd. 888-888-1172. Headline, Wall Street Journal. From PepsiCo to GM. Big advertisers set to cancel commitments to TV networks. Companies are seeking to take advantage of options that become available May 1 to cancel up to 50% of third quarter spending. Oh my gosh. Owners of broadcast and cable networks are trying to prevent big cracks in a major pillar of the business, but it ain't working. The upfront ad market crumbling as people like GM, PepsiCo, Cracker Barrel, Old Country Store, General Mills, Domino's Pizza, even Sanofi SA, they're all canceling their ad buys. Why? Well, people are watching a lot of TV, but they're not spending money. I mean, they're going to be giving away cars pretty soon. It's going to be like 2008 for a half year. For many months, people are going to take a while to get over this until we get a therapeutic or a vaccine. Therapeutics are starting to arrive. And so when you look out at the markets and you see everything is red overseas today, Japan down 0.5%, Hong Kong down 0.25%, England and Germany in the red, that means America will probably have to come back and save it today. But the big story of the day is TV networks thought they were invulnerable. They got great audiences, but people are canceling. That's not happening to me, by the way. You know why? Because my audience supports my sponsors, and I thank you for doing so. AndrewandTodd.com have never been busier. Harry's Razors with the code Hugh. All of my friends at Relief Factor, Honor Bound Coffee, everyone is LifeLock. They're using, people are going to mypillow.com and using Hugh. Thank you, thank you, thank you. My sponsors have been great, but TV, not so great. That's the big business story of the day. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Don't forget to sign up for the Huniverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.huniverse.com.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. We know that when Speaker Pelosi gets in the room where it happened, she has a huge agenda item for the next COVID relief bill. She wants cash for cannabis. I'm joined by Representative Mike Waltz of Florida's 6th Congressional District. Congressman Waltz, welcome back. Always a pleasure to talk to you.
Hey, thanks so much, Hugh. That's a great lead-in because that's exactly what happened.
They want cash for. We're going to come back for that, but I got to ask you for. You're a Green Beret, decorated combat veteran, all that good stuff. Well, it looks like Mike Garcia, who's a Super Hornet pilot, F-18 pilot, is going to win in California. So finally, you'll have some air cover in Congress.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And Lord knows we need reinforcements. And we haven't been able to verify it, but his squadron was over supporting us in Afghanistan. I called several F-18s in for close air support. Wouldn't that be incredible if we could figure out that he was overhead on the forehead?
Well, I talked to him yesterday. His call sign was Paunch, so you're going to have to go back and find out if Paunch was in the skies above you. But it looks like he's joining you. That means you'll have Gallagher, a Marine. You're a Green Beret. We got a Navy pilot, so we got. I'm sure there's some Swabbies as well, some swells. But are there any Air Force people in Congress at all?
Yeah, there actually is. There's a retired one-star by the name of Don Bacon out of Nebraska. He's a great member. But, you know, the bigger he's fantastic. Look, I never make Air Force jokes. They saved my life on multiple occasions. But I'll give the Marines and the Navy a hard time.
Well, I mean, a Marine intel officer, you ask Gallagher what that means. It means you're a Packers fan. Look, Congressman, let's get to this. Let's get to this bill that Nancy Pelosi entered. They really did. They put in the relief bill cash for cannabis. I talked to Robert Costa about it. He's trying to keep a straight face. But that is, you know, Mitch McConnell has one priority, which is getting businesses to reopen free of plaintiffs' lawyers picking over their bones. And she wants a bailout for marijuana businesses.
Yeah, well, she just wants I think we're running out of green ink in Washington, D.C. As much money as we're printing. And here's the thing, Hugh. They're not done. Even if she got this through, she won't. The Senate will stop it, thank God. But she's already telling the most progressive members that it's okay. We didn't get everything in this one. There'll be another one this summer. So she's getting beat up from her left that this wasn't big enough. And I think, you know, this is the agenda. They're laying it all out. This is what we have to decide this November. But look, I think, and I know you agree with us, we face two existential threats for this country. One is an America led by socialists, and two is a world led by Chinese communists. And this is the fight of, I think, the rest of our adult lives.
Well, they gave us a gift yesterday in the first fight because they gave us the gift of transparency. It's a $3 trillion throwaway. I mean, if you know what the other side wants, you have a huge advantage. And I would just pin that on every Democrat running. They want $3 trillion in bogus stuff instead of focusing on getting businesses reopened like McConnell and the Senate is doing. And I know you guys would do if you had the majority, you would be focused on getting businesses reopened safely. But it's going to – do you have an opponent yet in Florida's 6th, Congressman Waltz?
I do. Alan Grayson, if you're a former Democratic member who was, I think AOC before she was cool.
Oh, no. AOC is not nuts. She's crazy, but she's not nuts. Alan Grayson is back?
He's back. He's coming after my seat. So buckle your seatbelt.
He is independently wealthy, isn't he?
Supposedly. I don't know. I don't believe much of what's coming out of that side of things.
Oh, wow. I've never been to Port Orange, Florida. I was looking at your district this morning. I always do a little research on every member who comes on. I've never been to Port Orange. What is Port Orange like?
Well, it's really almost a suburb of Daytona. It's beautiful. It's right, you have the ocean right there. But the kind of the feel of things is a southern little town. So come on down. We had just a few months ago, we had the president at the Daytona 500 with the Beast taking a lap on the track, and I hope we can get back there.
Tell me a little bit about how reopening is going in Daytona and in your district.
People are really eager. We have fortunately been spared. People think of Florida and they think, if they haven't been there, they think it's all South Beach, Miami. But, in Northeast Florida, Central Florida, you get a few miles off the beach and you're in jeans and boots and pickup truck, with a lot of agriculture. And it's much more rural. It has much more of kind of a southern feel. And we have been spared a lot of the worst of this virus, and people are ready to get back to work.
All right, let's talk now about China, because I have Richard Haass coming up next hour. And we're going to disagree about China because I think we're in Cold War 2.0. And I
agree.
I cut my teeth with Richard Nixon at the age of 22. Call the world as it exists, not as you want it to be, but as it is. And the way it is right now is that General Secretary Xi is opposed to it. I mean, he's our enemy.
Well, look, this is, from with all due respect to Richard and others who have believed for the longest time that capitalism would change China, that our openness we should lead with our chin in the boxing ring, and they'll be nice and they'll play along. And that thinking absolutely has to change. The Chinese explicitly, it's in Xi's speeches, it's in his leaders' speeches that they seek to dominate us economically by stealing our technology, and then that will make the military domination almost a fait accompli. And I think the best analogy is essentially how the United Kingdom at post-World War II just slid aside. It was just kind of accepted that the United States was the new global leader, and that's what the Chinese, people are talking about a military conflict. In Chinese thinking and military strategy, if it comes to a military conflict, they've failed.
Yeah.
They want us to essentially slide aside, and if we keep spending ourselves into oblivion, like Pelosi wants us to do, they're playing right into their hands. The other thing, we cannot underestimate their misinformation campaign. It is happening in our think tanks, like Richard's. It's happening at our local and state officials. One of my other Democratic opponents just called me a racist because I introduced a bill to stop our technology theft in our universities with 400,000 Chinese students coming here per year. Doesn't make them bad kids. They are forced by their government to vacuum up everything they see, from robotics to AI. And then also calling out these professors. 2 more were just arrested from Emory University and University of Arkansas, pocketing $500,000, $500,000 a year from the Wuhan Institute of Technology. At the same time, they're accepting tens of millions of dollars in DoD and NIH, Defense Department research funding. This has to stop, and we're going to stop it with this new China task force that we just set up in the House.
Now, Congressman, I talked to Senator Cotton yesterday. I assured him there no Chinese money was used in the production of this show. But we joke a little bit, but I am very serious. I think DOJ ought to offer an amnesty to every professor who is compromised, because obviously Harvard's had it, Emory has it, University of Arkansas has it. What's been done 3 times has been done 30 times or 300 times or 3,000 times. We're not talking about a small problem. If you find Harvard, Emory, and University of Arkansas professors on the take from the PRC, there are more.
It's the tip of the iceberg. It really is the tip of the iceberg. But the other thing, and the good news, is the president, I talked to him a few weeks ago, our federal pension plan that was on the verge of sending hundreds of billions of dollars into Beijing Stock Exchange. The president is moving to put a stop to it in the short term to replace those board members. This is our U.S. military 401k plan that was going right into Beijing Stock Exchange. But here's the next step. We have over 20 state pensions that are sending hundreds of billions into China as well, right into the state-owned enterprises that are rebuilding their military. So stopping the capital flow from the United States into Beijing, shifting our manufacturing, either onshoring it or nearshoring it. I think India is a great option, second to the United States. And then stopping this, the massive leakage of our technology are, I think, 3 huge initiatives that'll make a difference.
Now, Congressman, the Stealth War by Richard Spalding is a pretty hardcore book. In it, He raises the problem of money in think tanks, and he suggests that some think tanks are totally compromised. I've not heard that leveled against the Council on Foreign Relations or AEI, but do you have a list? I mean, I don't want to go McCarthyism here, but do you know of any particular think tank that is compromised by PRC CCP money?
No, I think they're much more clever. they're much more clever than how they're distributing their money. So I don't want to call one out, but we are looking into it, and we're also looking into the universities in violation of DOE, Department of Education rules, and the law are not declaring how much foreign money they're receiving. And so that is another piece in addition to the think tanks. We're looking at the universities as well.
All right, last question.
It is all over.
It's huge. It's a big problem. Armed Services Committee, you are an Army guy. You're a Ranger, a Green Beret. I think that the Department of Defense is going to have to move significant money from ground, land forces into naval forces, cyber, and space. The big Army's not going to like that, Michael Waltz. What do you think about it?
Well, I think the Army certainly, not to sound defensive for the Army, but I agree with you. I think my problem with the Navy is that they have a 30-year shipbuilding plan they like to change every 6 months.
That's true.
Right? I mean, it's just ridiculous, and I think they deserve the hard time they're getting from the Congress right now. But you're right. What I think this virus is proving that many of us have known is that geography matters a lot less when we have space, cyber, and other ways our adversaries can get into the United States. And that's where the next wars are going to play out. It's on the economic, technological, cyber, and space warfare. That's why the Space Force is so important. I'm also on the Space Committee going forward.
Michael Waltz, always a pleasure to talk to you, Congressman. I will look for you in Port Orange soon. Thanks for joining me. Don't go anywhere, America. Coming right back with Eliana Johnson. I want to talk about Obamagate, and I want to talk about Exhibit 4 to the Department of Justice ruling and what Judge Sullivan is up to. Judge Sullivan, I am not worried about this. I got told by an AUSA, look, he's just opening the window so that everyone can throw their stuff on the wall and they're going to put it in a corner. I remember when I was on the D.C. circuit, I walked in and we had the AT&T breakup case, the last remnant of it, the access charge case. And there were 100 million briefs in the office, and the clerks waved at me going out the door, saying, good luck with that. We never read them. Really, we didn't. We read the parties' briefs, and maybe one or two from serious people. But everybody had to file an amicus. So Judge Sullivan is just letting the world send in whatever they want, and he knows what he's going to do. He knows what he's going to do. I'll cover it as it happens. Just like I tell you about ReliefFactor.com 3 times a day, I'll tell you 3 times a day. Whatever Sullivan does, I'll tell you what the judge does. He is best known for taking the skin off of DOJ when they framed Ted Stevens. I think he had to do the same thing with the Mike Flynn team. We will see. But I know that ReliefFactor.com works even if I don't know what Judge Sullivan's going to rule. I do know that you ought to take your Icarian, Curcumin, Resveratrol, and Omega. I know I think the weather is pretty nice inside the Beltway today. I will be out and about if it is. I don't go out in the rain. I'm no dummy. But I do use my ReliefFactor.com up and down the stairways of the Beltway, up and down the hallways and the roads and the byways and the alleys of the Beltway. Got to go meet with people so I can pick up the list of the I'm joking. No one has leaked the list of the people who are unmasked, though I wish they would leak it to me. Maybe they've leaked it to Eliana Johnson, who's next. Get to ReliefFactor.com right now. Join the legions of us who feel better every day because of it. Stay tuned. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. On July 3rd, Hamilton will air over the Disney platform. I think Eliana Johnson is probably just going to watch it nonstop 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 times in a row. I think she's a Hamilton addict, like Fetching Mrs. Hewitt. Eliana Johnson is the editor of the Washington Free Beacon. Am I right, Eliana? Are you a Hamilton person?
I hate to disappoint you, but I have not seen it yet. I actually listened to the book.
I'm stunned.
I know.
Eliana.
I can't tear myself away from the MJ documentary.
Oh my gosh, Eliana Johnson, you have not watched Hamilton.
No.
Well, that's a scandal. We're going to have to publicize that. Let's go to another scandal. The Nancy Pelosi bill yesterday leads with cash for cannabis. I mean, what were they thinking? The country is in the middle of a pandemic. 80,000 Americans are dead, and the Democrats want a bailout for the marijuana business?
The bill has no chance of becoming law, but I think, as you suggest, it's not great for Democrats, and it does say, I think, a lot about their priorities. It seems that progressives were allowed to write this bill because there's no chance that it will advance and the Senate will pass it. But yeah, cannabis stuff in there. Several mentions of diversity, environmental justice grants, and a lot of things that I think the average American would have difficulty connecting to the pandemic ravaging the country right now.
Yeah, the Republican strategy, is articulated by Leader McConnell, Larry Kudlow on the show yesterday, is to keep saying one thing: tort reform, protection from the plaintiff's bar. Liability. It's all about not letting people get sued for virus-related illness. They just want one thing. So they have one thing which they must have. The Democrats list $3 trillion worth of spending, including cash for cannabis. And I think to myself, they really have just handed the Republicans a sword.
I think that's right. We'll see if Republicans take the sword. Messaging has not always been the strong suit of Republicans, but certainly there's plenty of material in that bill for Republicans to work with and to argue that Democrats are pushing pet projects rather than addressing the crisis.
Well, I think they argue they're frivolous. Cash for cannabis is the way. I think they message this is just not a serious party. It's an absurd, stupid party, and that's an absurd, stupid thing to ask for in the middle of a pandemic. Eliana, have you read Exhibit? You haven't watched Hamilton, but have you read Exhibit 4 in the Department of Justice motion to dismiss the Flynn charges, which is the interview of Sally Yates by the FBI and the special counsel's team?
I've been going through these transcripts. I have not read that one yet.
When you read that, you will sit back in your chair and say, OMG. Sally Yates lays it all out because Obamagate is both a term of derision and a term of attack online. It's really Exhibit 4 is what people ought to be focused on, because she admits she walked into the meeting on January 5 with Joe Biden, the president, John Brennan, Comey, and no one had told her they'd been wiretapping Flynn. It's there in black and white.
Right, and this is what Comey went over her head for. That's what you're referring to?
Yeah, not only did he not tell her then, he then refused to tell her that they were sending the agents in to see Flynn after he took over the corner office in which O'Brien sits now. It's actually shocking. A lot of lawyers. I worked at the Department of Justice. I have never read anything this shocking. That the FBI simply tossed the Department of Justice out of the chain of command.
Well, you've helped me prioritize my reading of the transcripts now.
This is Exhibit 4 to the motion. The transcripts, that's a maze into which I wade only reluctantly, but I have read all of the DOJ's filing because Judge Sullivan is up. What did you make of his ruling yesterday? Ali Infree, if you have a comment to make about this case, send it in.
It's unclear to me if it will have a material impact. It does seem he's slowing down the efforts to dismiss the case, but not clear to me how much of an impact that will have on the outcome.
I think you're right. An AUSA who I trust, 22 years prosecuting bad guys for justice, said, don't worry about this. This is his way of letting the bilge come through, and he'll still rule the right way. So I think you're right about that. Eliana, is Obamagate real? Is it going to be an issue come November? Or is the pandemic everything that matters?
I think that it will be very difficult for other issues to break through the pandemic. And I think there's a real chance that it not only will impact President Trump, but will have a down ballot income. We've seen comparisons start to emerge to the 2008 financial crisis, another time when Republicans held the presidency, and it had real down ballot implications. 2006 was a bad year for Republicans. Then 2008 was a bad year for Republicans. 2018 was bad for Republicans. I think there's a chance that 2020 could be bad merely because it will be a verdict on the current economic situation and on the president's handling of the coronavirus.
Now, evidence contra would be Mike Garcia winning in California 25th last night.
It would be. You're right.
And that, to me, that's such an interesting race. It ain't over yet because the Democrats cheat out there after the polls are closed, but we'll watch it closely. And yes, Media Matters, I said it. You can write it up. The Democrats cheat in California. Live there for 30 years. They do. I'll be right back, America. Thank you, Eliana Johnson. Utah Senator Mike Lee is next on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Prison Fellowship's Angel Tree Summer Camps. Click on the banner at hughhewitt.com.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour. Hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt celebrating a little bit. Mike Garcia, F-18 Super Hornet pilot, appears to have won the California 25th congressional special election, which is going to throw a lot of the blue bubble people for a loop. They thought Republicans were going to lose everywhere. But in fact, Speaker Pelosi helped us out yesterday by introducing the most ridiculous bill ever in the middle of a pandemic that has claimed 82,000 American lives unleashed on the world by the Chinese Communist Party. And what do you know? They voted for the Super Hornet pilot in California over, a Democratic state assemblywoman. And it appears to be sufficient enough that the typical hijinks that follow with ballot harvesting will not be enough. Now, my friends over at Media Matters who are listening, write this down. Democrats cheat. All right, that's what they do in California. They harvest ballots and they cheat. It's not what Americans believe in. And everyone who's out there knows. Ask Leader McCarthy. Just write it up any way you want. Emo is over at Media Matters listening. But I don't think they can cheat this much. Remember the title of my 2004 bestseller. If it's not close, they can't cheat. They can't beat Mike Garcia now. I think he's coming to Congress. I don't think they can close a 12% gap. So that is the good news. Other good news, givingmasks.com. Every mask that you buy from givingmask.com, if you use givingmask.com/Hugh, they will match it mask for mask with a donation to Children's Hospital of Orange County. They asked me when they became a sponsor of the show, hey, what's your favorite hospital? We'll send a box of masks for every box of masks that's ordered from givingmasks.com if they use /Hugh. I said, well, that's Chalk. I've worked for years with the people at Chalk. I know what they do, and I know how great they are. So please be generous to them. Get your masks. You're going to need them for about 6 months, I would guess. Get them from givingmask.com/Hugh. And please don't forget Angel Tree over at HughHewitt.com. I'm doing this at the top of the hour so you can remember before you leave for work. Those kids who have a mom or dad in jail have a tough summer ahead of them in a socially distanced world where they're isolated already because they already got a mom or dad in jail. And some of the Angel Tree camps will open. Most of them probably won't. We don't really know. I don't have any way of knowing. There's a Wall Street Journal story on it today. All the camp directors in America are figuring, well, can we do this? What about the kids? There's this strange syndrome, Kawasaki-like syndrome, but it's so small, the numbers. What do we do? Well, at Angel Tree, they're going to do what's right for the kids. They always do. So if they can send them safely to camp, they will. And if they can't, they're going to send them a box of blessings, which includes sports equipment, basketball, soccer ball, the kind of stuff that kids want. They're also going to send them $150 worth of coupons for good food, not, what kids would normally buy with $150 you don't want them to buy. No, good food for the family, age-appropriate Bible, some care, some love. That's over at Angel Tree. Head on over there, and please be as generous as you can. I want to play for you a montage of what Michael Flynn has put up with over the last 3 years. General Flynn, 3-star general, decorated hero. Stanley McChrystal called him the finest intelligence officer he's ever worked with. This is a montage of the media slandering him for 3 years. Cut number 1.
We've all been betrayed. Michael Flynn was betraying his country.
Michael Flynn betrayed his country.
Michael Flynn was betraying his office.
Michael Flynn may have been a turned agent to Russian intelligence, being an asset that may have been turned by Russian intelligence.
General Flynn! General you feel you betrayed your country!
He has brought this on himself, just like he has brought himself immense shame.
Michael Flynn would still be the national security advisor, and that would be the threat to national security.
His first national security advisor, Mike Flynn, may be a Russian asset.
He's guilty.
What Flynn did in supporting a candidate who the Russians were helping through this operation, so egregious.
It's funny because it's treason.
I can't imagine the slanders that
Giuliani said
against this man. And I know he pled guilty. I think I know why he did it. We will find out eventually. He will write a memoir that will be explosive. I have interviewed him before on this show. He's a serious man. He's a hero. And he screwed up in the registration for Turkey. I know that. I know his son did some iffy things. I don't know why he pled guilty. I know that the Department of Justice is so deeply disturbed by what they've discovered that they've asked for a dismissal of a plea which I've never seen. And Judge Sullivan has said, oh, we'll take some income on that. You file your comments. And people are going wacky about that. Don't worry about that. AUSA, Shipwreck Crew, follow him on Twitter, says to me, don't worry, that's just the judge letting everyone file. He's not going to read it. And I remember when I was a clerk on the D.C. Circuit a million years ago, and I walked in the door the first day I think I start in July. I can't remember. Terry Ross, great lawyer, and I are co-clerks. We walk in the door, and it's the AT&T access charge case. This is one of those cases that clerks gleefully pass on to other clerks because there are a million briefs. The wall is stacked with AT&T access charge briefs in 1983. As far as I read more about AT&T access charges than I ever wanted to read. And the fact of the matter is, eventually you just start flipping through them and looking for a different lawyer who's interesting or a different friend. You just don't read them. You read the parties, you read the Department of Justice, you read AT&T, you might read some of the baby bells. You might look for a great lawyer. If a great lawyer like Lawrence Schreiber or Alan Dershowitz at that time files something, you might read what they say. But just with Judge Sullivan, they're going to get all this nutty stuff. And we already saw some nutty stuff on the web last night. He's not going to read that stuff. What he ought to read is Exhibit 4. Again and again and again. Exhibit 4. Sally Yates's interview with the special counsel and the FBI. It is astonishing. Heartbreaking, actually, that James Comey did what he did. An end run around the Department of Justice for whom he worked. I cannot see keeping this play. I can't imagine Judge Sullivan keeping it. We will wait and see. All right, Anthony Fauci at the Senate yesterday talking about remdesivir. I want you to hear this. It's not a bullet. It's not a silver bullet. Cut number 15.
I'll talk a bit about the remdesivir success antiviral in a moment. But let me emphasize that there are a number of broad-spectrum antivirals that are in various stages of testing. In addition, we will be looking at convalescent plasma, which is plasma from individuals who've recovered from COVID-19, to be used in passive transfer, either in prevention or treatment. In addition, hyperimmune globulin, which can be used as a gamma globulin shot. We'll be looking at repurposed drugs, as well as immune-based therapies and host modifiers, and finally, monoclonal antibodies. Let me take a moment to
describe. A bunch of people in the Senate, they're completely lost at this point. And I know who they are, and you know who they are, and they have been lost before in public, and if they're watching Fauci, they're saying, what in the hell is he talking about? Because he did not slow down, and the Steelers fans are really confused. Meanwhile, though, they do understand this. They try and politicize it. Aren't you in a fight with Trump? This is what Dr. Fauci says, cut number 18.
Yes, no, there is certainly not a confrontational relationship between me and the president. As I've mentioned many times, I give advice and opinion based on evidence-based scientific information. He hears that. He respects it. He gets opinions from a variety of other people. But in no way, in my experience over the last several months, has there been any confrontational relationship between us.
I don't understand why people want the president. The president does not fight with people. He even hates to fire them. Forget the reality show stuff. He doesn't like it. I don't understand why people in the middle of a crisis want the nation's face of public health to fight with the president. But they do because it's good for ratings and they're losing all their ad, as I just told you in the Wall Street Journal. Let me do the business story of the day again, brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew Del Rey and Todd Avakian. That's AndrewandTodd.com. Go to that website. They will help you refinance your house and save money. If you're going to buy a house, and by the way, now is a great time to buy a house, do it with AndrewandTodd.com. 888-888-1172. They're with Sierra Pacific Mortgage, and they are the very best lenders in America. AndrewandTodd.com. Do not go anywhere else. Save yourself money. Don't clog up the system, please. There are a lot of people who need to save money. There are a lot of senior citizens who need a reverse mortgage. There are a lot of veterans who need a 0% down mortgage. There are a lot of people who just need to save a few $100s a month. And they need to go to AndrewandTodd.com. Don't be a looky-loo. If you've got like a 3.15% loan, don't be asking for 3.05%. Don't do that. Let AndrewandTodd.com take care of people who need to be taken care of. Business story of the day. The television networks are getting slammed with ad cancellations. Even though their audiences are huge, their advertisers haven't got money. They're not like AndrewandTodd.com because they're not doing a lot of business at the car dealerships right now. That's the big story of the day. But in the meantime, go to AndrewandTodd.com. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. In the middle of a pandemic, any news is great news, and the news that Hamilton is coming out on July 3rd on the Disney Channel, that's great news for you Hamilton addicts out there, including Captain Mark. The Bee Gees bread, and I don't like those other things that Captain Mark likes, but he loves Hamilton, and that's understandable. Sad news for my friends in the Warren JFK community, my high school. Big Al died. Sister Mary Jean, Sister Aloysius. She's the one who got us all through geometry. Greatest lady. Such a great lady. And teaching up to, I talked to her probably a year and a half ago. Still at work in North Carolina. She never stopped teaching. She was 82 years old. She's just extraordinary lady. A great, great American. And to all the sisters out there who are just like her, thank you for your decades and decades of humble and terrific service. Sister Mary Jean now got an extra angel on my side as of yesterday, and she will be missed. Ken Starr is one of my favorite analysts because he actually, when he was a D.C. Circuit judge, he had the chambers next door to me when I was a clerk. Then he would always come over and swear in SES people when I was at OPM. Then he was at Peppered. I mean, I've crossed paths with Ken and Alice Starr for decades. He's on Fox News yesterday talking about how terrible Obamagate was in the unmasking. And Rick Grinnell took the details over to Justice yesterday. The acting director of National Intelligence took all the details of all the bad stuff that happened during Obamagate. And the simple definition of Obamagate is the intentional interference with the seamless transition of power, which is the glory of our republic. Here's Judge Starr on Fox News yesterday, cut number 20.
Well, I think he's done what he needed to do, which is to appoint someone who's very respected, a career civil servant for so many years, Jeff Jensen, to conduct a fresh review of the entire situation with General Flynn. And now we have the benefit of that in the disclosures that came out in the motion to dismiss the information or the indictment. And when you read that document, as I know you have, Bill, it's quite chilling. And it suggests that Bill Barr did precisely what he should have been doing as an honest attorney general of integrity. Serious issues had been raised about the investigation. He appointed Jeff Jensen from St. Louis, who had been unanimously confirmed by the Senate, to take a fresh look. There was new information that General Flynn's very able lawyer, Sidney Powell, had uncovered. And the result was that interview on January 24, 2017, should never have taken place whatsoever. And it was the seventh floor, the FBI leadership, that drove that process that resulted in these really tragic circumstances for General Flynn. With respect to unmasked... Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to ask you about that. Joe Biden did an interview earlier today, too, and I want to get your characterization of it. But go ahead on the unmasking matter. Will we know? Should we know the names?
We may know. We don't necessarily. Not necessarily should know, because this is classified information. This is highly sensitive information. Think of it. It's eavesdropping on United States citizens, right? That's the effect, because they, of course, were monitoring the conversations of the Russian ambassador to the United States, Mr. Kislyak. That's exactly what our intelligence officers should be doing. But then here is a U.S. person talking to the Russian ambassador. That needs to be presumptively protected, and that is masked. The unmasking, sort of Phantom of the Opera, comes when there is a need within the executive branch to know, okay, who was this person for legitimate governmental purposes? The evil here, Bill, in a nutshell, is this unmasked information, namely about General Flynn, was then leaked to the Washington Post. And that is likely a crime. It's likely a felony. This is very sensitive, classified information you don't reveal to David Ignatius or other reporters or commentators. This kind of highly sensitive information.
Okay. All right, stop right there. Quite likely a crime. Ken Starr never overstates things. He also said at the beginning of that, the filing from Justice was, quote, quite chilling. I've been trying to communicate to people. That Exhibit 4 by Sally Yates is a blockbuster. It's breaking through the pandemic, which is a worldwide crisis. But that story, the threatening of the peaceful transition of power, has not happened since 1861 in this country. when the South seceded. No one has done what they did since 1861. That's why it's a blockbuster. But the world still knocks at our door, and we talk with Richard Haass from the Council on Foreign Relations about that shortly. Stay tuned, America. Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. That's George III from Hamilton. It's released on July 3rd this year. Talk about a guy who had problems with the world. Richard III was it. I'm talking now with Richard Haass, who is, of course, the president of the Council on Foreign Relations. You see him often on television. He's been a guest on my show for years. He had a brand new book out, The World, A Brief Introduction. I personally love the subtitle more than the title, The World. I love A Brief Introduction. Richard Haass, welcome back to the Hugh Hewitt Show. Always good to have you.
It's been too long. Great to be back.
The World is being featured everywhere. I recommend it to anyone who's interested in. It's sort of like Bill Bryson's A Brief History of Nearly Everything. But I am going to start with the toughest question, the very toughest question, which is Gaza. And I read everything you wrote in the Middle East chapters on this book, but you didn't really dive into Gaza because it seems to me there isn't a solution, Richard Haass. What is the solution for the world's toughest problem?
But just for those who are not intimately familiar with Gaza, it's probably the most densely populated small piece of real estate on Earth. It's led by a group that has radical policies and, among other things, does not accept the legitimacy of the state of Israel. It also is led by a group that does not support the Palestinian leadership in the West Bank. So at the moment, there is no solution for it. I know Americans like to think of solutions, that everything's a problem. Well, some things are conditions. And for the foreseeable future, Gaza may simply be a condition at best to be managed. And the pandemic has made it a much more difficult condition to be managed, again, given the population density. And interestingly enough, it is forcing a little bit of low-key Israeli cooperation with the authorities there. But I think for the foreseeable future, this is not a situation that's going to be resolved, so I think it's simply going to drift.
Yeah, Richard, one of the things that alarms me, of course, I just finished watching Fauda, this third season of the Israeli Shin Bet thing. So it's all about Gaza. And then I read about it in Elie Siegel's book. They got a 97% water problem. 97% of the water table is polluted. That's not an inhabitable place much longer.
No, it is one of the most miserable places on Earth. You're right. It's got all sorts of environmental issues, water issues, unemployment is off the charts. And it in some ways foments the very radicalism that is DNA. The question is, at some point, do people there realize their leadership is something of a dead end? But at the moment, there's nothing going on diplomatically in any meaningful way between Israelis and Gaza. The Israelis are essentially glad to be rid of it. If there is any diplomatic possibility, it would be more with between Israel and those living in the so-called West Bank. Though I think at the moment the biggest dynamic is not a collaborative diplomatic enterprise, but the big Israeli debate is about annexation. Essentially, what you have in Israel is many people, and beginning with the prime minister, but supported by the Trump White House, essentially giving up for the time being on negotiated outcomes and looking more for unilateral outcomes to essentially change the status quo on the assumption that the status quo, while not necessarily permanent, is going to be with us for years, if not decades to come.
In fact, Secretary Pompeo is probably on a plane as we speak, headed to Israel. I always disclose my son works at State, so I don't follow or go along on those trips, but it'll be fascinating. In your book, The World, you write at page 117, as is almost always the case, it is useful to review the history to better understand the present. As I think about Gaza, my last Gaza question, I think about 1948 India, when Pakistan broke away. Now, it was a terrible time. 1 million people died, I believe. But eventually resettlement was the only solution. Is that the solution for Gaza, Richard Haass, where very, very generous resettlement of Gazan citizens occurs?
Well, the question is where. There's not going to ever be a Palestinian right of return where Palestinians can move to what is now Israel. So the question is, either Gaza has to be made to be a habitable place, which is very challenging given the density and the poverty, or some of these people may in fact need to move. And the question is, though, who in the Arab world would let them in? People are not raising their hands to do so. So again, a friend of mine used to have on his desk three boxes: in, out, and too hard. And there's something about Gaza that fits squarely in that third box. And that's why, again, at the moment, I just don't see how it's settled. I mean, you raise a really interesting point. In history, there have been population transfers, which at times, even though it's incredibly painful in the short run, provided mechanisms in the longer run, if not for a peace that everybody loved, at least a situation that people could live with. It was done in Europe, in the Greek-Turkish areas early in the 20th century. You've had elements of it elsewhere, but at the moment, I don't see people lining up to do what you're suggesting.
It's 2 million people. It would cost a lot of money. It would require a lot of cooperation, but I don't see a way out of that. Let's turn to Cold War 2.0, which you don't want to call it. When you were at Oxford, I was working for Richard Nixon, spending hundreds of hours with the former president in the Elba of America in San Clemente, and he always said, call the problem what it is. And to me, this is a confrontation that is just absolutely Cold War 2.0. The vice president did not want to say that on this show last week. You don't want to say it in the book. You don't want to say it in your New York Times piece. But, Richard, this is the reality. They have unleashed this poison on the world, and the Wall Street Journal today reports they're still not letting the world into Wuhan.
Like the Chinese behavior in Wuhan since the outbreak of the disease through today can't be justified, can't be supported. In many ways, we ought to be publicly criticizing it. We ought to be joining with others. That's not the issue. The question is, what you've raised is whether a Cold War construct makes sense. And I simply don't think so. I think Chinese ambitions, while considerable, particularly in Asia and the Pacific, are not global, certainly not in a military sense. And also, I simply don't think it's enough to inform American foreign policy. If we think of ourselves involved in a Cold War with China, even if we get the upper hand, it still doesn't do anything to deal with, among other things, pandemics, climate change, proliferation, terrorism. It's just an inadequate basis for thinking about our relationship with the world in the 21st century. So don't get me wrong. I think we need to push back against China, whether it's over its treatment of Hong Kong or over the treatment of its Muslim minority. We need to make clear they can't unilaterally act to create facts in the South China Sea. We're not going to accept it. They can't use force against Taiwan. I get all that. We've got to push back. When they steal or try to steal our vaccines, we've got to frustrate them. I get all that. But I simply don't think that this can be an adequate framing for an American foreign policy in a world that's increasingly going to be defined by these global challenges. And by the way, we'd be better off if we could at least get China to help on some of these where they have a self-interest in helping. This is not Pollyanna talk. China is going to be one of the big losers from climate change. China is potentially a big loser from pandemics.
You know, my biggest argument, I like a lot of the book, The World. I always read your op-eds, but I did have a problem in your New York Times when you suggested...
Wall Street Journal, I think it was.
Wall Street Journal, excuse me. That they bear enormous responsibility for the pandemic, but we can't blame Beijing for our own lack of PPE. First of all, we didn't run out of ventilators. We were short on PPE, but we can. I'm a lawyer, not a PhD. I'm not one of those. I'm a lawyer. I know proximate cause. We can blame them for everything. When you are the causative agent in an unforeseeable circumstance and you don't do everything, you bear all the blame, Richard. It's not our fault.
But this is not. But the world of international relations is not in a courtroom. So what we're dealing with is a situation where, yes, China and continues to do things that are, I believe, outrageous when it comes to the public health problem. But here it is. It's now, the second week of May, almost the third week of May, and we still don't have anything remotely close to what we need to have in testing. That I cannot blame that on China. That's on us. And the White House has not made it a sufficient priority. We're not. Richard, I'm not talking about.
It's not on us. The CDC was not set up for this. The FDA was not set up for this. We're adapting as quickly as possible. I won't blame them for what Tony Fauci told me was a technical gap that they didn't intend. All of this is because China lied. All of it. And we have to pin the tail on them or we won't get to the right level of recognition of reality. I know you're a realist like I am, but if we don't pin the responsibility on the CCP and General Secretary Xi, they will avoid it.
Again, I believe we ought to be critical of China where it has, in this case, allowed these markets to open, or if it did come out of a lab for not owning up to that, or it's allowing people to leave Wuhan, for silencing public health experts. I get all that. But at some point in life, you've also got to look at what you're doing. Climate change is another example. We can say what extent is this the responsibility of this or that country or this or that business? But at the end of the day, we have agency. We have the ability to do things, and we're not doing them. We're not doing it and we haven't done it on the testing issue with the pandemic. We have agencies there. So, you can say, sure, this never would have happened had China acted responsibly. I get that, but at some point, you got to play the cards you're dealt. We have been dealt some very tough cards. It was inevitable this virus would reach the shores of the United States. From that point on, I can't believe you would sit here and seriously say that the United States has done everything it should and could.
Oh, no, I don't. I think the CDC, Dr. Fauci on this show, accepted responsibility for the technical problem. I understand we glitched up the testing, but I've read Michael Pillsbury, I've read Graham Allison, I've read the Oracle, Dr. Kissinger. I've gone up to see Dr. Kissinger. I don't know which one of them said it. It might be you in the world. That which is unified must divide. That which divide must unify. I think we have to look at China very clearly and begin to reallocate our chips back to Taiwan and to begin to reallocate our forces to the Pacific, because they are far more lethal than I think you want to say because you're a diplomat, Richard.
Well, I'm a diplomat, but diplomacy is just a tool, as is military force, as are sanctions, and so forth. Look, as I said, we need to push back against China where they deserve to be pushed back. China needs to understand that unilateral uses of military force, whether to create facts or coerce, are unacceptable. So one thing we ought to be doing, instead of beating up on our allies, as we seem to do regularly, let's shore up our alliances. Let's get closer to South Korea and Japan. This administration made what I thought was the seriously strategically flawed decision not to enter the Trans-Pacific Partnership. Let's present China with a powerful trading and investment bloc that forces them to change their behaviors or they'll lose access. There's lots of things we can do to push back against China that we haven't done and that we should be doing.
On that note, we agree. And so let's close it there. I think the world, a brief introduction, is must reading for people. And Richard Haass is always a great guest to have. The book is out in bookstores everywhere. You can get it from Amazon.com, Barnes & Noble. The World, a brief introduction is indeed that, and it's useful. Please get it. Thank you, Richard Haass. Let me also tell all of you to get my sponsor. I've lost the bag. ReliefFactor.com. There it is. Show it off to everybody. I take it every day, and today I'll be out in the Beltway. I'll be doing my 6 to 8 mile. I may run today. I may trundle. I don't ever run. I'm not fast enough. I used to run 7-minute miles. Did a 3-hour and 13-minute marathon, just saying. But that ain't now. That's like a half marathon now. I'm so slow, people think I'm a bush. But I'm out there because of ReliefFactor.com. I carry curcumin, resveratrol, and omega. I take it every day. You should take it every day. And you need to exercise every day because you ain't getting any younger. Even if you're doing socially distant, even if you're wearing a face mask like you should be, bikers, I'm talking to you. No matter where you are, no matter how you're doing it, exercise and feel better with support for the temporary relief of the minor aches and pains that ReliefFactor.com provides. And don't forget, Honor Bound Coffee. HonorBoundCoffee.com. Get your coffee from them. 100% of the profits from HonorBoundCoffee.com go to support military families through a lot of great organizations like Semper Fi and Freedom Fund, Semper Fi and Freedom America's Fund. They're the beneficiaries of Honor Bound Coffee. Get into it and get back here for the last segment. Welcome back, America 50. Time for the final segment of the Hugh Hewitt Show. I am joined by Alistair Dell, who is the new Maricopa County attorney in the heart of Phoenix, in the area of Arizona over which the next election will be fought. Alistair Dell, welcome. It's great to have you on the show for the first time.
Well, good morning. Thanks for having me.
How are you enjoying? Bill Montgomery was a friend of mine before he ascended to those heights where we're no longer allowed to talk to him. He's a Supreme Court justice now. But how are you enjoying replacing a guy who's really set a very high bar for the office?
You know, this is the greatest job in the world. I'm just truly honored to lead the men and women. You know, we're the third largest prosecution agency in the country.
That I did not know. Now, I'm curious about the reason I asked you on. Last week I had on an advocate for emptying prisons as much as possible because of COVID. I saw that you've taken a different point of view. Would you explain your point of view and what you think is the best policy?
Absolutely. It's important to remember when somebody is in prison or the Department of Corrections here in Arizona, they've been convicted of a felony and they're serving a court-ordered sentence. And at that point, the county attorney's office is not involved. We're involved on the front end of the system. And during COVID-19, we've actually taken steps to reduce the jail population by 30%. We're working with the private defense bar and looking at individual cases to see where we can agree to modify release. But the reality is there's people in there that are non-bondable for sex offenses on children. There's murderers, and we're simply not going to risk public safety, even though we have to balance the public health pandemic.
Now, you've just mentioned, of course, every parent ears picked up because every parent worries about sex offenders because in many people's view, they can't be rehabilitated, especially second-time offender. They're just not going to be rehabilitated. So you can't let them out. What are you doing in the jail? I don't know that has anything to do with your writ, but what are you advising the jails to do?
Well, we've been advising the jails to take sanitary precautions, isolate those with symptoms. They have tested those with COVID-like symptoms, and we've only had one positive COVID-19 test in our jail system.
Oh.
So we're having success with this, and we're doing our best to mitigate it, but we're working collaboratively with the courts, the sheriff's office, and the defense bar to expedite those people who are in custody, their cases, so that they can be released from custody if that's appropriate.
Let's talk about the categories of cases where you think it is appropriate. Where, Alistair Adele, do you think leniency and imprisonment ought to rule, maybe home confinement, bracelet, that sort of thing?
There are people that are booked into the jail system for low-level offenses that normally we would give them diversion. But unfortunately, the court system is largely shut down right now. And so they're not being able to be put into diversion because diversion is also on hold for social distancing. So the point of diversion is those low-level offenders, shoplifter, a drug offense, we want to get them back into society being successful and contributing to the economy. And we're going to do that looking at the offender and not just the offense, because they're committing these crimes for underlying reasons, mental health, drug addiction. So we put them into an evidence-based program to get them the help that they need to be successful and not recidivate.
Who makes that decision on diversion, Alistair Adele? Who does that?
We as the prosecutors do. We have a very robust program that we've rolled out. In fact, we eliminated a financial barrier to participate. It used to be that the county attorney's office charged a $630 fee just to participate, and we've eliminated that barrier. So we had planned to roll out this program where we'd have far more people into diversion rather than traditional prosecution, which is a burden on our system. Unfortunately, with the pandemic, we're having to take a back step on that just a little bit, but we're going to get there. By no means is anybody getting a free pass in this, but there is a segment of the population that's offending that we believe can be rehabilitated and not reoffend and not break into your house or my car.
Now, I want to close by talking about Doug Ducey, one of my favorite governors, if not my favorite governor. Reopening is a delicate balance. What role does prosecution and law enforcement have in the reopening if you see people going too fast or outside the lines of the carefully planned reintroduction of commerce as quickly as possible?
Well, I can't speak for law enforcement being proactive. We are not encouraging them to seek out violators of the stay-at-home, stay-safe order, especially now that the governor's relaxed it. As far as the criminal justice system, we're working close with the courts and our other stakeholder partners. We don't have any jury trials going right now. So we're going to, on June 15th, we're going to have our first jury trial with experimenting with social distancing so that the jurors are 6 feet apart. People are nervous right now, and so we want to make sure they're comfortable coming back into the system. We can't just turn on the spigot right now and flood the court with all these cases because the system will collapse.
You know, I hadn't even thought about that. I served on one criminal jury in my entire life. I don't know how I got on it. I was a former DOJ person, but I got on it. That guy thought I would screw it up. But of course, you're in close confines in the jury room. That's a great challenge. I hadn't thought of that.
It's going to be a real challenge for us, and the courts are really looking at it. They're working with us and the defense bar to see how we can make this safe for everyone, because we're going to have jurors that aren't going to want to come in because they're still nervous and they want to stay at home, and that's understandable. At the same time, we can't just stop the system. We have people that need to go to trial.
Alistair Adele, that is fascinating. I hope you'll come back and tell me how that experiment. Everyone's going to have an eye on Maricopa County. I appreciate your getting up early to talk to me. The new Maricopa County attorney, third largest prosecutorial office in the United States. It's important to talk to Alistair Adele because that's going on in every prosecutor's office across the United States, making these sorts of choices. Thank you, Alistair Adele. Thank you, America, for listening. Thank you, Ben. Thank you, Dwayne. Thank you, Adam. I'll be back tomorrow on the next Hugh Hewitt Show.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you in part by No Safe Spaces.